East Haven Jane Doe, East Haven, Connecticut, identified as Patricia Newsom, who went by the name of Trisha. An unclothed woman was found inside of a tarp in a drainage ditch behind a department store in East Haven, Connecticut. Paint drops on the tarp made them think they might be looking for someone with a connection to painting for a living. Something was found at the scene, an item that has not been disclosed, and they would come to believe whatever it was linked this case to a man who committed a similar act in Maine. They believe since the beginning that he was responsible, but there's never been any way to confirm this. If they have any DNA from the perpetrator, it's not mentioned. Often it wasn't preserved because at the time they had no idea of the existence of DNA or what it would mean to these cases. They did know that her life was taken in a different location before she was moved behind the department store. When they examined her, they determined she not only had no clothing on when found, but she had been bound and gagged. Her COD is believed to be asphyxiation. They noted she'd had rhinoplasty and extensive dental work. They sent out x-rays to local dentists, but there were no hits or clues as to her identity. The odds of identifying her actually got worse. This identification almost didn't happen at all. She was buried a year after she was found in a cemetery described as being very old and abandoned. In fact, some of the graves dated back to the 1700s. It's not clear how much the cemetery was being used by the authorities at the time that our Jane Doe was buried, but it appears it was used more than was known. The coroner's team went back to the plot where her unmarked grave was located. They exhumed the casket and got it back and began the process of examining her in an attempt to obtain DNA, and they got a huge surprise when the person inside was male and not female. It's actually incredibly lucky that was the case. It kind of makes a person wonder if maybe they might accidentally run the DNA on the wrong person. Had it been female, they would have just processed the DNA, believing they had the specific Jane Doe. They had gone back to the cemetery with ground-penetrating radar, and they found more surprises. As I said, they could have processed the wrong person, especially since there were 5 times the number of caskets there that were supposed to be there. There were actually caskets buried on top of other caskets, and no one had any idea. I tried but couldn't find any explanation of what was done with the other unknown remains, but they did, however, find the correct casket, eventually arriving at the name of Patricia Newsom. Trisha was born in Idaho, but she was still a child when her family moved to the East Coast. She had been sent to a boarding school near Monticello, New York, and she was there for 2 years before she ran away with another student. The student she was with hasn't been named so far. We know that when she ran away in 1974, she was 18, and that this was likely the year her life was taken, although she wouldn't be found until the following year, and that would happen in August of 1975. Trisha's sister, Marianne Collette, was just 9 when she last saw her big sister. Marianne made it her mission to find her sister, and she never gave up looking for Trisha. Trisha's remaining family came in from Tennessee for the press conference. Marianne finally had the answer after searching for nearly 50 years. Marianne would say that her biggest emotion right now is relief, describing the relief of knowing what happened to Trisha as being tremendous, saying she always believed in her heart that Trisha was gone forever, but not knowing for sure was really difficult. Speaking to a Hartford newspaper, she said, "Many people's idea of closure is a little bit different, but for me, this is a lot of closure. Because whoever did this to my sister, whoever they are, they're going to meet their maker or meet these fine folks. Either way, it's not going to go well for them," saying she wanted to express her gratitude to both the police and the people of East Haven. So now with this case, it boils down to desperately needing to speak to someone who went to school with Trisha, asking anyone that fits this to call the police. I always run a number at the end of each segment as to where you can call. Unfortunately, it's a dead end without information, and at this point, that's where they are. Her peers from the boarding school in Monticello, New York, might know something that they don't even realize is important. All that's really known is that she left in 1974 and was supposedly headed to Maine. It's believed the two might have hitchhiked, but it's unknown if they stayed together or if the other person ever reached her destination. If the authorities know the identity of the friend, it hasn't been released. Because this was so long ago, it might fall to her peers to help identify who did this to Trisha. Her peers would likely be in their mid-60s or so so it's entirely possible this case could still be closed. Her sister Marianne would say, just come forward. If you know who did it, anonymous tip, something, anything. Unburden yourself, it's been a long time. Trisha was found 136 miles away from where she ran away, which is about 218 kilometers. Trisha Newsom has gone unidentified for 47 years. Had Trisha lived, she would have turned 86 in the South Korean John Doe, identified as Carmen Carrillo. One of the more recent DNA identifying projects is that of those representing the U.S. in war and finally bringing them home to their family. North Korea and South Korea were not yet split in the way we know them today. The Second World War would end on September 1st, 1939. At the end of the war, Korea, which had been formerly occupied by the Japanese, was divided along the 38th parallel. This division began when the Japanese were defeated in World War II. After Japan surrendered, there was an understanding that Korea would be liberated from Japan, but as to how that would look was up for debate, and not everybody agreed. It was eventually decided that it would be placed under an international trustee of sorts, to be removed when the Koreans were considered ready for self-rule. The Soviets accepted this division, and as a result, Korea was split. 11 years after the division, the Korean War would take place from 1950 to 1953. At this time, the Soviet Union was siding with North Korea, which was communist, and the West was supporting South Korea. Many considered it a war against international communism. 75,000 soldiers from the North Koreans' People Army would cross the boundary into South Korea in June of 1950. This was considered the first military action of the Cold War. A month later, in July of 1950, American troops entered the war on behalf of South Korea. The two sides fought back and forth across the 38th parallel, with both sides suffering a lot of loss, and neither side was winning. By 1953, it was decided that the best option was to settle for an official division between the two. There was a concern that otherwise it would lead to World War III. In the end, a combined 5 million people, including both civilians and soldiers, were lost. The division between the two Korean countries would become permanently divided. President Harry Truman made a statement suggesting that the Soviet Union, which is now of course Russia, would keep right on going and swallowing up one country after another if not stopped, suggesting that for this reason, freedom was actually on the table, whether or not we would all keep it. The weird thing is that in many ways, Russia's behavior today isn't all that different in comparison to the concerns of 75 years ago. Left behind in the Korean War were remains that are still to this day trying to be identified. In this case, the remains of a U.S. serviceman were recovered in 2013, although they wouldn't be identified until 2023. Carmen Carrillo was born on July 28, 1930, and at the age of 10, Carmen moved with his family to Lompoc, California. As soon as he was old enough, he enlisted in the United States Army, eventually being assigned to Headquarters Company, 1st Battalion, 38th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division. His unit was deployed to the Korean Peninsula during the Korean War. He was wounded in battle on February 12, 1951, but was able to return to war exactly 2 months later, on April 12, 1951. At this time, he was promoted to the rank of corporal, but he was unfortunately reported missing in action just a month later, on May 17, 1951. The war would go on for 2 more years, but 62 years would pass before his remains were found. No one knew what happened to him. In fact, there was no record of his remains being recovered, nor was he listed as a prisoner of war. After his remains were recovered in 2013, they were shipped back to the U.S., where they were buried and later exhumed for analysis in September of 2021, using both DNA and dental charts in hopes of identification, which of course was successful. Carmen Carrillo was just 20 when his life was lost. Had he lived, he would be 93 years old today. He was missing for 73 years before his remains were identified. I want to thank Carmen Carrillo for his service. May he rest in peace. Huge thanks for watching all the way to the end, and a big thanks to all of you who consistently like and comment on the videos. Whether you leave a full comment or an emoji, it makes a huge difference. So if you consistently watch my videos, maybe take a moment to subscribe. It's a huge push toward the videos being suggested to new people. The next goal is 20,000. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.